My name is Rachel. I am 28 years old, and last Thanksgiving, my father invited me home just so he could publicly announce that I was the reason his business was failing. The dining room looked like something out of a magazine. My mother had spent 3 days preparing. Fresh flowers on the table, the good china, candles flickering in holders that only came out twice a year. There were 14 people crammed around that table. Aunts, uncles, cousins, my brother Kevin with his new girlfriend, and me, sitting at the far end near the kitchen door like I always did. I had driven 4 hours from Portland to be there, taken 2 days off work, brought a homemade pie that my mother barely glanced at before sliding it to the back of the counter behind the store-bought ones. For the first hour, everything felt almost normal. People passed dishes around, complimented the turkey, asked polite questions about jobs and weather. My brother talked about his promotion at the tech company where he worked. My father nodded along, beaming, telling everyone that Kevin had always been the smart one in the family. I was used to that. I had been hearing some version of it my whole life. Then my father stood up and tapped his wine glass with a fork. The room went quiet. He cleared his throat and said he wanted to make an announcement before dessert. My mother looked confused. My aunt stopped mid-sentence. Even Kevin put down his phone. My father looked around the table with that expression he always wore when he was about to say something he thought was profound. The one that made him look like a man giving a TED Talk instead of a guy who owned a struggling heating and cooling company in a small town in Ohio. He said that the business had been going through some challenges lately, that the economy was tough, that suppliers were raising prices and customers were cutting back. He paused for effect, then looked directly at me. But the real problem, he said, was that some people in this family take and never give anything back. I felt every pair of eyes in the room turn toward me. He said I had been draining the family for years, that I had borrowed money I never repaid, that I had failed to contribute to the household even when I was living under his roof, that my college years had nearly bankrupted them, that my constant need for help was the reason he could not invest properly in the company. My brother actually laughed, not a nervous laugh, a real one. He said something about how at least someone finally said it out loud. My cousin Megan looked at her plate. My aunt shifted uncomfortably, but did not say a word. My mother stared at the centerpiece like she was trying to disappear into it. I sat there with my fork still in my hand, feeling the heat rise up my neck. For a second, I thought I might actually throw up. My father was not finished. He said that he had done the math, that over the years I had cost this family over $40,000 in support, loans, and missed opportunities. He said it like he was reading a verdict, like I was on trial and the jury had already decided. I finally found my voice. I asked him what loans he was talking about. I asked what support. I had been living on my own since I was 22. I paid my own rent, my own bills. I had not asked him for money in 6 years. He waved his hand like I was being ridiculous. He said I knew exactly what he meant, that I had signed paperwork, that I had agreed to help when the business needed it, that I could not just pretend I had no responsibility now that things were tight. Something cold settled in my stomach. Paperwork, agreements, help with the business. I remembered a few times over the years when he had asked me to sign things, quick phone calls, emails with attachments, just a formality, just for the bank, just to help with the loan application. I had trusted him. I had not read every page. I had not asked questions because he was my father, and I thought fathers did not lie to their daughters about money. My brother leaned back in his chair and said, maybe I should start paying back what I owed instead of showing up for free food and pretending everything was fine. A couple of people laughed. Quiet, uncomfortable laughs, but laughs all the same. I looked at my mother. She would not meet my eyes. I set my fork down very slowly. I wiped my mouth with the cloth napkin. I pushed back my chair and stood up. My father asked where I thought I was going. He said we were not done talking about this. I told him I was done listening. I walked out of that dining room, grabbed my coat from the hook by the door, and left without saying goodbye to anyone. I could hear my father's voice behind me, something about how I always ran away from responsibility, how I never faced anything, how I would come crawling back when I needed something. The cold November air hit my face as I stepped outside. I sat in my car for 10 minutes before I could stop shaking enough to drive. On the way back to Portland, I did not cry. I did not scream. I just drove in silence, replaying every word, every signature, every time I had trusted him and signed something without understanding what it really meant. By the time I pulled into my apartment parking lot at 2 a.m, something had shifted inside me. The shame was still there, but underneath it was something harder, something that felt like the beginning of a decision. If you want to know how one Thanksgiving dinner turned into the month my father lost his business, his savings, and the house he thought was his, stay with me until the end. To really understand why that night changed everything, you need to know what had been happening in that family for years. You need to know the pattern. And you need to know what I found when I finally started looking at the paperwork I had been signing since I was 19 years old. Growing up in that house, I learned early that love was conditional, and Kevin always met the conditions. My father, David, had started his heating and cooling company when I was 7. Before that, he worked for someone else, came home tired, and mostly ignored us both equally. But once the business took off, everything changed. Suddenly, there was money for Kevin's travel baseball team, for his private pitching coach, for summer camps that cost more than our family vacations used to. I asked once if I could take art classes at the community center. My mother said maybe next year. Next year never came. When Kevin made the varsity team as a freshman, my father threw a party in the backyard, rented a tent, invited half the town. I remember standing near the cooler watching my father put his arm around Kevin's shoulders and tell everyone this was the kid who was going to make something of himself. I was 15. I had just won a statewide essay contest. My mother had mentioned it at dinner the night before. My father had nodded without looking up from his phone and said that was nice. That was always the word. Nice. My grades were nice. My artwork was nice. My acceptance to a state university was nice, but not as impressive as Kevin getting recruited by a Division II school for baseball, even though he dropped out after one semester when he realized he was not good enough to go pro. My father never mentioned the dropout. It got rewritten as Kevin deciding to pursue business opportunities instead of wasting time on a degree he did not need. When I graduated with honors 4 years later, my father came to the ceremony, checked his watch 3 times during the speeches, and left before the reception because he had a job to quote. The money thing started small. I was 19, home for winter break during my sophomore year. My father sat me down at the kitchen table one evening and slid a piece of paper toward me. He explained that the business was expanding. He needed a small loan to buy new equipment. The bank required a co-signer, and my mother's credit was not strong enough because of some old medical debt. He said it was just a formality, that my name would be on the paperwork, but the payments would always come from the business account, that I would never have to worry about it. I did not understand what a co-signer really meant. I was 19. I trusted my father. I signed where he pointed and did not ask for a copy. A year later, there was another form. This one was for a credit line, he said, just for emergencies, just in case cash flow got tight during the slow season. He promised it would never be used unless absolutely necessary. I signed that one too. Then there was something about refinancing the house, and something about a vehicle loan for a new work truck, and something about inventory financing. Each time he called or sent an email with an attachment. Each time he said it was routine. Each time I signed without reading because I was busy with school, then busy with my first job, then busy trying to build a life 3 states away from a family that made me feel invisible. I never saw statements. I never got notifications. Everything was sent to my parents' address because that was the address on file, and my father said he would handle it. The one time I asked about it, maybe 5 years ago, he got annoyed. He said everything was fine. He said I was being paranoid. He said he had been in business for decades and did not need his daughter questioning his judgment. So I stopped asking. Meanwhile, Kevin got a different kind of help. When his first startup failed, my father gave him $30,000 to try again. When his second idea flopped, my father connected him with investors, bought him a new laptop, and let him live rent-free in the house for 2 years. When Kevin finally landed a stable job at a tech company, my father told everyone that his son had entrepreneurial spirit, that failure was just part of the process, that Kevin had learned more from those experiences than any college could teach. I had never received $30,000. I had never lived rent-free. I had never failed at anything because I had never been given enough runway to try. All I had done was sign my name when my father asked, trusting that he would never use his own daughter as collateral for risks I did not understand. The night after Thanksgiving, I could not sleep. I lay in my apartment staring at the ceiling, replaying my father's words. $40,000, signed paperwork, agreements I had made. At 3 a.m, I got out of bed and opened my laptop. I started with the free credit report websites, the kind that let you check once a year. I had not looked at mine in at least 2 years, maybe longer. When the report finally loaded, I felt the floor shift under me. There were accounts I did not recognize, a credit line with a $12,000 balance that I had apparently opened 7 years ago, a loan for $8,000 that showed my name and my parents' address, another loan, another credit line, an equipment financing agreement, a business account with my Social Security number attached. The total outstanding debt linked to my name was not $40,000. It was closer to $63,000. I scrolled through the list, my hands shaking, clicking on entries I had no memory of approving. Some of them had been opened when I was still in college. One was dated 2 years ago, long after I had stopped signing anything at all. That was when I realized something that made my stomach turn. Either my father had been forging my signature, or he had kept copies of the documents I had signed years ago and used them to open new accounts without telling me. Either way, I had not borrowed $63,000. I had not agreed to be responsible for his business debts. I had not volunteered to destroy my credit so he could keep a company afloat that was probably failing because of his own decisions. I spent the rest of that night downloading everything I could find: credit reports, account statements, transaction histories. I created a folder on my laptop and named it simply Evidence. By the time the sun came up, I had a clear picture of what my father had done. He had used me as his personal financial safety net for almost a decade. Every time the business hit a rough patch, he had borrowed against my name instead of his own. Every time the bank said no to him, they said yes to the version of me that existed only on paper. And the whole time, he had been telling the family that I was the one draining them. I sat at my kitchen table with a cold cup of coffee, staring at the numbers on my screen. I thought about calling my mother. I thought about driving back to Ohio and confronting him in person. I thought about screaming at someone until my throat was raw. Instead, I picked up my phone and texted the one person I knew who might actually understand what I was looking at. Her name was Dana. We had worked together at my first job out of college. She was a paralegal now, studying for the bar exam. She had helped me with my lease once and had mentioned she was looking for experience with financial cases. I typed a simple message. I think my father has been committing fraud in my name for years. I need help figuring out what to do. She texted back within 10 minutes. Come over tonight. Bring everything you have. That was the moment the real work began. Dana lived in a small apartment on the east side of Portland, the kind of place with mismatched furniture and law textbooks stacked on every surface. When I showed up that evening with my laptop and a folder full of printed documents, she cleared off her kitchen table and put on a pot of coffee like we were about to pull an all-nighter. We did. She started by having me walk her through everything from the beginning. Every document I remembered signing, every phone call where my father had asked for a quick favor, every time I had trusted him without asking questions. Then she opened my credit reports and started reading line by line, making notes in a yellow legal pad. Every few minutes she would stop and ask me something. Did you ever live at this address after 2018? Did you ever apply for a credit card with this bank? Did you authorize anyone to use your social security number for business purposes? The answer was always no. By midnight, Dana had filled 6 pages with notes. She leaned back in her chair and rubbed her eyes. She said what my father had done fell into a category called familiar fraud. It was more common than most people realized. Parents opening accounts in their children's names, spouses hiding debt, family members using shared information to borrow money without consent. The banks rarely caught it because the addresses matched, the phone numbers matched, and the signatures looked close enough. I asked her what my options were. She said the first step was documentation. I needed to pull every record I could find. Bank statements, loan agreements, anything with my signature or my father's. I needed to request copies of the original applications from every lender and compare the signatures. I needed to file disputes with the credit bureaus for every account I had not authorized. She also said I should consider filing a police report, not because I necessarily wanted to press charges against my own father, but because having that report on file would help if any of the creditors tried to come after me for the debt. I felt sick just thinking about it. A police report against my father for fraud. Dana must have seen my face because she softened her voice. She said I did not have to decide anything tonight. She said the first step was just gathering information. Once I knew exactly what I was dealing with, I could figure out how I wanted to handle it. Over the next 2 weeks, I became obsessed with paperwork. I sent letters to every lender on my credit report requesting copies of the original loan applications. I used a template Dana gave me, certified mail, return receipt requested. I created a spreadsheet tracking every account, every balance, every date, every address. The responses started coming back within 10 days. Some of the lenders sent scanned copies of applications with my signature at the bottom. When I compared them to documents I knew I had signed, the handwriting was close, but not identical. The R in Rachel slanted differently. The loop on the L was tighter. Someone had practiced my signature, but they had not gotten it perfect. Other lenders sent applications with electronic signatures, the kind where you just type your name into a box. Those were easier to fake. All someone needed was my personal information and access to my email. I checked my email account settings and found something that made my blood run cold. There was a forwarding rule I had not created. Every email from certain banks had been automatically forwarded to an address I did not recognize before being marked as read and archived. Someone had been intercepting my financial notifications for years. I changed every password. I enabled 2-factor authentication on everything. I set up a new email address that no one in my family knew about and started using it for all financial correspondence. Dana helped me file disputes with all 3 credit bureaus. We wrote detailed letters explaining that the accounts had been opened without my knowledge or consent. We included copies of the signature comparisons and the evidence of email forwarding. We requested that the accounts be investigated and removed from my credit report. While we waited for responses, Dana dug into something else I had mentioned: the house. My grandparents on my mother's side had owned a small cottage on a lake in Michigan. When my grandmother died 8 years ago, she had left it to the family with the understanding that it would stay in the family for generations. My father had always said it was held in a trust, that he managed it as a favor to my mother, that the details were too complicated for me to worry about. Dana suggested I request a copy of the trust documents from the county recorder's office in Michigan. What came back 3 weeks later changed everything. There was no trust. The cottage had been transferred directly into my name when my grandmother died. Not my parents' names, not a family trust, mine. The deed listed me as the sole owner, with my grandmother's signature on the transfer dated 2 months before her death. I stared at that document for a long time. My grandmother had always been the one person in the family who made me feel seen. She used to tell me I was stronger than I knew. She used to say that someday I would understand my own worth, even if nobody else did. I had assumed those were just things grandmothers said. Now I realized she had done something concrete. She'd given me the cottage, not my parents, not Kevin, me. And my father had never told me. For 8 years, he had been managing a property that legally belonged to me, collecting rental income that should have been mine, making decisions about maintenance and repairs without my knowledge, probably using it as collateral, just like he had used my credit. Dana said this changed my legal position significantly. I was not just a victim of identity theft. I was also a property owner whose assets had been managed without her consent. There might be grounds for a civil case if I wanted to pursue it. I did not know what I wanted yet, but I knew what I needed to do next. I needed to take control of everything that was legally mine: the cottage, my credit, my name. Dana helped me draft a plan. First, we would complete the credit disputes and wait for the bureaus to investigate. Based on the evidence we had, she was confident most of the fraudulent accounts would be removed within 60 to 90 days. Second, I would formally notify the property management company in Michigan that I was the legal owner of the cottage and that all future communications should come directly to me. I would request an accounting of all income and expenses for the past 8 years. Third, I would send a certified letter to my father informing him that I was aware of the accounts opened in my name and the property held without my knowledge. I would demand a full accounting and give him 30 days to respond. Fourth, and this was the part that scared me most, I would prepare for the possibility that he would not respond reasonably. Dana said I should consult with a licensed attorney about potential civil and criminal remedies. She could help me find someone who specialized in financial fraud and family disputes. I asked her what she thought would happen when my father got that letter. She looked at me for a long moment, then said something I have never forgotten. She said that people who commit fraud against their own children rarely do it because they are evil. They do it because they have convinced themselves it does not count. They tell themselves it is family money anyway. They tell themselves the kid will never notice. They tell themselves they will pay it back someday. But when they get caught, she said, they almost never apologize. They attack. They make the victim feel crazy. They rewrite history. They turn the rest of the family against the person who dared to speak up. She said I should be prepared for that. I should document everything. I should not be alone when I confronted him. I should have copies of every document in a safe place he could not reach. I spent the next week organizing my evidence. I scanned every document and uploaded it to a secure cloud folder. I gave Dana the password. I printed backup copies and stored them in a safe deposit box at a bank my family did not use. Then I sat down and wrote the letter. It was 3 pages long. It listed every account opened in my name without my consent. It included the signature comparisons. It mentioned the email forwarding. It stated that I was the legal owner of the cottage in Michigan and demanded a full accounting of its management. I gave him 30 days to respond in writing, with a plan for addressing the debt in my name and returning control of my property. The letter went out on a Tuesday morning, certified mail. By Friday, my phone was ringing. The first call came from my mother. Her voice was shaky, confused. She asked what was happening. She said my father had come home with a letter and started yelling about lawyers and threats and how I had lost my mind. I told her I had not lost anything. I told her I had found it. I found the accounts he opened in my name. I found the cottage grandmother left me that nobody bothered to mention. I found 8 years of lies. She went quiet for a long moment. Then she said I was making this into something bigger than it needed to be. She said families handle these things privately. She said I should come home and talk to my father face to face instead of sending legal letters like a stranger. I said I had tried talking. I said I had tried trusting. I said I had spent a decade being the good daughter who signed whatever she was told to sign and never asked questions. That was over now. She started crying. She said I was tearing the family apart. I told her the family had been torn apart for years. I was just the first one to say it out loud. She hung up. Kevin called next. His tone was different. Less sad, more aggressive. He said I had really done it this time. He said Dad was furious. He said the business was already struggling and now I was making everything worse with my drama. I asked him if he knew about the accounts in my name. He hesitated just long enough to answer the question. I asked him if he knew about the cottage. He said that was family property, that it belonged to everyone, that Grandma would have wanted it used for the whole family. I told him Grandma had put my name on the deed, not his, not Dad's, mine. And if he had a problem with that, he could take it up with her grave. He called me a selfish bitch and hung up. Over the next 2 weeks, the real work began. I contacted the property management company in Michigan. They were surprised to hear from me. For 8 years, all their communications had gone to my father. He had presented himself as the authorized manager of the property, had signed contracts on my behalf, had collected rental income and directed repairs. I sent them a copy of the deed and a notarized letter asserting my ownership. I instructed them to redirect all future income to a new account in my name only. I requested a complete financial history of the property since my grandmother's death. The numbers that came back made me sick. The cottage had been rented out every summer for 8 years, peak season rates. The total rental income during that period was just over $94,000. After management fees and maintenance, the net amount that should have come to me was approximately $71,000. I had never seen a penny of it. Meanwhile, the credit disputes were progressing. One by one, the bureaus responded to my complaints. The accounts opened with forged signatures were flagged for investigation. 2 were removed from my report within 3 weeks. 3 more were marked as disputed while the lenders conducted their own reviews. I also filed a report with the local police department. Not in Ohio, where my father lived, but in Oregon, where I lived. Dana had explained that identity theft could be reported in either jurisdiction. The Oregon officer who took my statement was calm and professional. He said these cases were more common than people realized. He said having the report on file would protect me if any creditors tried to hold me responsible. My father finally responded to my letter on day 28. It was not a letter. It was a phone call. My mother's number on the screen, but his voice on the line. He sounded different than I expected. Not angry, controlled. The voice he used with difficult customers. He said we needed to talk about this like adults. He said there had been some misunderstandings. He said he had always intended to make things right, that the business had just hit a rough patch, that everything would balance out eventually. I asked him about the forged signatures. He said I had authorized him to handle things on my behalf, that I had given him permission years ago, that I was rewriting history to make him look bad. I asked him about the cottage. He went quiet for a moment. Then he said Grandma had not been thinking clearly when she made that deed, that she had meant for the property to stay in the family, that he had simply managed it the way it should have been managed. I told him I had the rental records. $71,000, 8 years, 0 disclosure. He said that money had gone toward property taxes and maintenance. He said if I wanted to see receipts, I could come home and look at the books myself. I said I was not coming home. I said I would be filing a formal demand for an accounting through an attorney. I said he had 30 days to produce documentation of every expense he had claimed against my property. His voice finally cracked. He asked if I understood what I was doing to him, to the family, to his business. I said I understood exactly what I was doing. I was taking back what was mine. He called me ungrateful. He said he had raised me, fed me, kept a roof over my head. He said I owed him everything, and this was how I repaid him. I told him I had signed papers because he was my father, and I trusted him. That was not the same as giving him permission to steal. The line went dead. That night, I made a simple post on Facebook. No names, no accusations. Just a few lines about learning that trust could be weaponized. About finding out that the people who were supposed to protect you could also be the ones who hurt you the most. About finally reading the fine print and discovering what had been hidden there all along. Within hours, I had dozens of messages. Old friends, distant relatives, people I had not spoken to in years. Most of them were supportive. Some of them asked careful questions that suggested they already knew more about my family's finances than they had let on. My cousin Sarah, my mother's niece, sent me a private message. She said she had always thought something was off about the way my father handled money. She said her own mother had lent him $15,000 10 years ago that was never repaid. She said if I ever needed someone to back me up, she would tell the truth about what she had seen. I thanked her and saved the message. By the end of the month, I had assembled a complete picture: the fraudulent accounts, the forged signatures, the stolen rental income, the decade of lies. I hired an attorney Dana recommended, a woman named Patricia who specialized in financial fraud and civil recovery. She reviewed everything and said I had a strong case. She said I could pursue criminal charges for identity theft, civil damages for the misappropriated rental income, and potentially a claim against the estate for breach of fiduciary duty. I asked her what she recommended. She said it depended on what I wanted. If I wanted maximum recovery, I should file everything at once and let the courts sort it out. If I wanted to preserve any chance of a relationship with my family, I should try one more round of negotiation first. I thought about my mother crying on the phone. I thought about Kevin calling me a selfish bitch. I thought about my father's voice when he said I owed him everything. Then I thought about my grandmother, the cottage on the lake, the deed with my name on it, the $71,000 I had never known existed. I told Patricia to prepare the filings, all of them. If they wanted to negotiate, they knew where to find me. They showed up on a Sunday morning, no warning, no phone call, just a knock on my apartment door at 8:15 while I was still in my pajamas drinking coffee. I checked the peephole and felt my stomach drop. My father stood in the hallway, arms crossed. My mother was behind him, clutching her purse like a shield. Kevin leaned against the opposite wall, scrolling on his phone like he was bored already. I did not open the door. My father knocked again, harder. He said he knew I was home. He said we were going to have this conversation whether I liked it or not. He said he had driven 6 hours and he was not leaving until we talked. I told him through the door that I had nothing to say to him. I told him my attorney had sent a formal demand letter and he should respond through proper channels. He laughed. A short, harsh sound. He said this was exactly the problem, that I had gotten some lawyer involved and turned a family matter into a circus, that I was embarrassing everyone, that I needed to open the door and act like an adult. My mother's voice came through, softer. She said, please. She said she just wanted to understand. She said we could work this out together if I would just let them in. I thought about calling the police. I thought about staying silent until they gave up. Instead, I did something I had not planned. I opened the door. They filed into my small living room like they were inspecting a crime scene. My father looked around at my secondhand furniture, my stack of library books, my tiny kitchen. I could see the judgment on his face. This was not the life he had imagined for his daughter. This was proof, in his mind, that I had failed. He sat down on my couch without asking. My mother perched on the edge of the armchair. Kevin stayed standing by the door, still looking at his phone. My father started talking immediately. He said I had made a terrible mistake. He said the letter from my attorney was ridiculous. He said any judge would laugh it out of court. He said I was wasting money I did not have on lawyers who were taking advantage of me. I let him talk. I sat in the chair across from him and let him say everything he had been rehearsing during the 6-hour drive. When he finally paused, I asked him one question. Did you forge my signature? Or did you just use the copies I signed years ago without telling me what they were for? His face changed, just for a second. A flicker of something that might have been fear. He said I was being dramatic. He said everything he had done was for the family. He said the business had needed help, and I was the only one with clean credit. He said he had always planned to pay it back once things stabilized. I asked him about the cottage. He waved his hand. He said that was different. He said Grandma had not understood what she was doing. He said the property needed to be managed properly, and I was too young and too irresponsible to handle it. I told him I had the rental records. 8 years, $71,000. Not one statement, not one check, not one word. My mother made a small sound. She looked at my father with an expression I had never seen before. He shifted in his seat. He said most of that money had gone to maintenance, roof repairs, new appliances, property taxes. He said if I wanted to see the receipts, he would show me the receipts. I told him my attorney had already requested those records from the management company. The total documented expenses over 8 years were just under $23,000, which meant there was approximately $48,000 unaccounted for. The room went very quiet. Kevin finally looked up from his phone. He asked what exactly I wanted. Money? An apology? To see Dad in jail? I said I wanted what was mine. The fraudulent accounts removed from my credit. The stolen rental income returned. Full control of my property going forward, and a written acknowledgement of what had been done. My father stood up. His face was red. He said I was out of my mind. He said he would fight this in court for years if he had to. He said I would spend every penny I had on legal fees and still end up with nothing. I told him I had already filed a police report. I told him the credit bureaus had confirmed 3 of the accounts were opened with forged signatures. I told him the evidence was documented, copied, and stored in 3 different locations. He took a step toward me. Not quite threatening, but close. My mother stood up and put her hand on his arm. She said his name quietly. David. A warning. He shook her off. He said I had destroyed this family. He said I had taken everything he built and set fire to it. He said I was no daughter of his. I had heard those words before. In my head during sleepless nights. In my fears when I imagined what would happen if I ever stood up to him. But hearing them out loud was different than I expected. It did not break me. It confirmed something I had known for a long time, but never admitted. He did not see me as a daughter. He saw me as an asset, a tool, a signature on a dotted line. I stood up and walked to my front door. I opened it and told them to leave. Kevin pushed off the wall and walked out without a word. My mother followed, tears running down her cheeks. At the door, she paused and said she was sorry. She said she did not know it had gotten this bad. I did not know if I believed her, but I nodded. My father was the last to leave. He stopped in the doorway and looked at me. His eyes were cold. He said this was not over. He said I would regret this for the rest of my life. I told him the only thing I regretted was trusting him. I closed the door and locked it. I stood there for a long time, listening to their footsteps fade down the hallway. My hands were shaking. My heart was pounding. But underneath the fear, underneath the adrenaline, there was something else. For the first time in my life, I had said no to my father and meant it. For the first time, I had chosen myself. The next 3 months moved slowly, like watching ice melt. Patricia filed everything. The civil suit for the misappropriated rental income, the formal demands to the credit bureaus, the documentation sent to the district attorney's office in Ohio for review. My father hired his own attorney. They sent back angry letters denying everything. They claimed I had authorized all the accounts. They claimed the cottage income had been properly managed. They claimed I was a disgruntled child trying to extort my own family. But claims are not evidence, and I had evidence. One by one, the credit bureaus completed their investigations. 5 accounts were removed from my report as fraudulent. The 6th was marked as disputed and eventually settled when the lender decided it was not worth fighting. My credit score, which had been dragged into the low 500s by debt I never knew existed, began to climb. The civil case took longer. Discovery requests, document reviews, depositions scheduled and rescheduled. My father's attorney tried to delay everything, but Patricia was patient. She said time was on our side. The longer it dragged on, the more it cost him. And unlike me, he did not have a case built on evidence. 6 months after that Sunday morning confrontation, my father's attorney called Patricia with a settlement offer. He would acknowledge that certain accounts had been opened without proper authorization. He would pay $32,000 in restitution for the rental income. He would sign over full control of the cottage with no further claims. In exchange, I would drop the civil suit and agree not to cooperate with any criminal prosecution. Patricia asked me what I wanted to do. I thought about it for 3 days. Part of me wanted to see him in a courtroom. Part of me wanted a judge to say out loud what he had done. Part of me wanted the world to know that the man who called me ungrateful and selfish had been stealing from me for a decade. But another part of me was tired tired of lawyers, tired of documents, tired of waking up every morning thinking about my father before I thought about anything else. I told Patricia to accept the settlement with one modification. I wanted a written admission of wrongdoing, not a vague acknowledgement of misunderstandings, a clear statement that accounts had been opened in my name without my knowledge or consent. His attorney pushed back. They negotiated for 2 weeks. In the end, the statement was softer than I wanted, but clearer than they wanted. It admitted that financial arrangements had been made without my explicit authorization and that this had caused harm to my credit and my finances. It was not justice, but it was something. The money arrived in my account on a Tuesday afternoon, $32,000. Not the full $48,000 I was owed, but enough to pay off my legal fees and have something left over. More importantly, the cottage was officially mine. No more management through my father. No more rental income disappearing into his accounts. I hired a new property manager and started receiving monthly statements for the first time in my life. The family fallout was what Dana had predicted. My father told everyone who would listen that I had betrayed him, that I had hired lawyers to destroy his business, that I had chosen money over blood. Kevin cut me off completely. He blocked my number and unfriended me on every platform. My mother called once, about 2 months after the settlement. Her voice was tired. She said she was sorry things had turned out this way. She said she wished I had handled it differently. She said my father was struggling with the stress and his health was suffering. I asked her if she had known about the accounts. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said she had suspected but never asked because she did not want to know. That was the most honest thing she had ever said to me. I told her I loved her. I told her I was not trying to hurt anyone. I told her I had just wanted what was mine. She said she understood. I do not think she did, but she said it anyway. We talk occasionally now, short calls, surface-level conversations. She does not mention my father. I do not ask. Not everyone in the family took his side. My cousin Sarah called after news of the settlement spread through the family grapevine. She said she was proud of me. She said her mother had finally admitted that the $15,000 she lent my father years ago was never coming back. She said watching me stand up had given other people permission to stop pretending. My grandmother's sister, my great-aunt Ellen, sent me a handwritten letter. She said my grandmother would have been proud. She said the cottage had always been meant for me. She said some people spend their whole lives waiting for permission to claim what belongs to them. I framed that letter and hung it in my apartment. I started seeing a therapist, a woman named Joan who specialized in family trauma and financial abuse. I did not even know financial abuse was a term until she used it. She helped me understand that what my father did was not about money, it was about control. It was about seeing me as an extension of himself rather than a separate person. It was about believing that children owe their parents an unlimited debt that can never be repaid. She also helped me see that I was allowed to grieve, not just for the money or the credit score, but for the father I thought I had, for the family I wanted but never got. Last month, I drove to Michigan for the first time in years. The cottage looked smaller than I remembered. The paint was peeling and the dock needed repairs, but the lake was the same. The trees were the same. The smell of pine and water was exactly how my grandmother's hugs used to feel. I sat on the porch and watched the sun go down. I thought about her, about the deed she had signed, about the gift she had given me that I did not know about for 8 years. She had seen something in me that I had not seen in myself. Strength, worth, the right to own something that was truly mine. If there is one thing I want you to take from this story, it is this. Family does not give anyone the right to use you. Love is not a blank check. Trust should not cost you your credit, your savings, or your future. If something feels wrong, read the paperwork, ask the questions, pull your credit report, check the deeds. Do not assume that the people who raised you would never lie to you. Sometimes they do. And when they do, you are allowed to protect yourself. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to take back what is yours, even if they call you ungrateful for doing it. I am not the daughter my father wanted. I never was. But I am finally the person my grandmother believed I could be, and that is enough.